Jennifer Bonner is the director of MAL, an architecture office based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. She is an associate professor at the Harvard Graduate School of Design and is the director of the MArch II program there. Jennifer earned her MArch at the Harvard GSD and worked for David Chipperfield and Foster and Partners in London before founding her own practice. Her practice has quickly gained visibility, particularly with the House Gables project, which might be the most published house of the year. While Jennifer has designed an array of projects across different scales and media, she chose to focus her portfolio on one evolving research and design topic titled Just Roofs. By following the architectural element of the roof through a sequence of research projects, design experiments, and finally a built house, this radically narrow topic demonstrated how richly she works between the analysis of cultural contexts, cited interventions, and the projection of new forms. So let's welcome Jennifer.
Okay. Hey, everyone. Thank you, Bryony. And firstly, I'd like to say thank you to the League. In Americans, we always say thank you like 1,000 times. I think that's been the last 20 minutes. But thank you to the League and the jury of this year's prize. I think I've admitted on social media that I've applied for this portfolio competition many, many times, probably too many to count. But I do think going through the exercise every year of thinking about my work through the lens of the League's theme of the year is a productive exercise for youngish architects, now old. And, just to say also thank you to friends and colleagues that are here tonight. It really means a lot to see faces we know in New York City. So as Bryony said, the submission and the work seen in the gallery is a series of research projects, objects, material mock-ups, and the reel situated around my obsession with domestic roof typologies. So Just Roofs will be the majority of the talk tonight. But first I wanted to show a few images which were included in the portfolio appendix. They were hidden at the very back because I know color sometimes throws juries off. And they demonstrate a kind of mantra for practice at MAL. So it's the extra colorful, the differential nod to food photography that gets played out in a project titled Best Sandwiches from 2016. In this proposal, we suggest that architecture might look like our very favorite sandwich, the grilled cheese. Then there are misbehaving activities like flying 2 drones around House Longa and House Esters in Krefeld, Germany. There's actually 4 drones. So 2 drones are scanning the 2 rear elevations. Those are, the famous elevations of the back of the houses. They're not twins, they're kind of doubles. And they're scanning them in synchronization. So I need more drones to then take videos of scanning drones. So this goes on for a little bit. I'll just skip through. This scanning hobbycraft resulted in a series of new materials, such as the mismatched millennial pink grout lines on white bricks, or CMU block with the architect's CAD concrete hatch as a bump map that looks more like a digital rendering than real masonry. My work often begins with a question as opposed to a traditional sketch by the architect, and timidly asks, is a drawing architecture seen here in another axon? Or concludes with a question like, what are scale figures for architecture cited in the public realm? And we point to this couple who took their wedding photographs in front of our project. They were not hired, and nor were they staged models. The work relates directly to popular culture in the form of a guidebook about the Dirty South. So Mira and Cyrus, this thing swivels, so you gotta stay balanced. And records conversations with hip-hop collective Goody Mob. Or when I commissioned 35 female writers, designers, contributors, architects, and curators in this special issue of Art Papers, a contemporary arts magazine based in Atlanta. And based on the curatorial position and content, we threw a pool party in an empty pool at the Pink Motel in LA for the magazine's launch. The work is graphic, and did I mention colorful? It reorganizes architectural models into a series of still lifes. This is a project for Harvard's platform, a publication called Still Life. And most importantly, it takes cues from art practice, seen here in the lighting effects borrowed from Barbara Caston's use of colored gels in art photography, not architectural photography. And so this is the 400-page book, now printed in Mandarin by Tongji Press. So that was just kind of the appendix kind of collapsed into a couple of spreads. And to describe just roofs, it's really walking through the research which began 5 years ago. So this work starts with kind of the highly conceptual and asks questions about the role of the massing model in architecture. So domestic hats is on the left. And resulted in the full construction of a one-to-one model on site. And so on the right is House Gables, and it's a single-family house located in Atlanta, Georgia, and is one of a handful of houses constructed fully out of cross-laminated timber. And so I'm interested in asking questions around the ordinary. I'm interested in what I'm calling the contractor stockpile. They're all things pertaining to the roof, like eaves, valleys, ridges, rakes, soffits, gables, hips, etc. This is the way we're building, as you all know, traditional stick frame constructions. I would argue that maybe this is like the American cathedral. In the contractor camp, there are endless variations of roof pitches, but there's also the system where we're building vented roofs, and so what you get is a flat ceiling, and the geometry of the roof you never see. And so I'm proposing that we should start building with unvented roofs, and so we start to see the geometry. So I have hundreds and hundreds of pictures of these kind of conditions, and I'm looking at the banal forms found in the everyday. And then this is just a quick refresher lesson. These are kind of the most basic ones. But I started to look at what happens when multiple roofs start to form, and I took a sample of 50 houses across 8 different neighborhoods in the city of Atlanta. And what we noticed is, you can see in Object 47 in Buckhead, this is a more affluent neighborhood, and so we have kind of a 6,000 square foot villa covered by, maybe like 7 roofs mashed up together. And then in Object 41, this is Cabbagetown, and this is a lower socioeconomic neighborhood, and so we have a simple shotgun house and a simple extruded hip roof. I think both are interesting, and I'll try to talk through that as we move forward. The contractor canon, the pitches are usually less than 12 to 12, and I'm advocating for exaggerating those pitches and going 14 to 12 or 17 to 12. This is a installation. I was awarded the Young Architects Forum Emerging Voices Award, and I was asked to make a solo show in an exhibition with that was about 10,000 square feet. And they called me and said, you've just won this award. And I was like, well, I didn't apply for it. And they said, well, you have to do this exhibition. And I was like, well, I don't really have any work that fits that kind of space. And so, really the task was like, okay, how can I start to kind of blow up the massing model, which is something that sits on the architect's desk. It's usually about iterations and it's small in size. How can I blow that up and change the scale without adding any more detail, right? And so this was the 16 massing models. And so during the opening, we lit the models from top. And so you get really the profiles of some of these forms. In other cases, the elevations are kind of lit. And this is like a sampling of what those kind of roof geometries would look like. So clearly this is a formal project, but I'm starting to figure out there's maybe this hunch that the roof can start to organize architecture in the domestic interior. So after the show, we drug the models out of the gallery and placed them as yard art in the front yards of the original houses where we sampled the roofs. This is my maternity picture. I think I was like 5 months pregnant there. So really the thesis here is to look at the potential of the massing model in potentially shifting paradigms, right? So we know very well the free plan and the ROM plan of the past, and so I'm kind of suggesting maybe we cross those out and start looking at the roof plan as a way of organizing space. And this is really focused on the domestic interior, and we'll see how it plays out in house gables. The second kind of model that I'm working through this roof exercise is the dollhouse model, and you'll see it in the gallery. It's 1 to 12 scale, which is how dollhouses are made in the scale. And so here I'm trying to push two new alternative motives. One is material, at the same time as trying to figure out the space of the rooms. And so in the floor plan on the first floor, is the top one, there's kind of no indication of the roof inflection on the plan, but the second floor you start to see how the roof starts to divide and subdivide space, and you particularly see it in the sections where roof rooms start to be hung from the larger roof above. So obviously this project is sited in the American South. It undertakes an old tradition of faux finishing, and for Southerners, there is a history of not being able to afford precious materials and the subsequent desire of faking it. So on the left, this is a real place. It's called the Southern Institute of Faux Finishing in Brandon, Mississippi. I've never been there. And this is an example of what I mean, like people trying to make a porcelain tub look like a carved chunk of marble or something. Demonstrated in Gone with the Wind, a desperate, hungry, and broke Southern belle in her post-Sherman plantation, Scarlett O'Hara, turns to ordinary curtains to make a dress. And here I'm interested in the moment that the curtain becomes a dress. It's precisely when the fake, false, and faux emerges. And it gets played out even further in Carol Burnett's spoof, Went with the Wind, as the infamous green velvet curtain dress looks more like a curtain than it does a dress. And we know this because we can see the curtain's valance coming back as a strong image. So Burnett's O'Hara is the real. It's combining crumbling columns and black soot with a grand staircase. So I would say House Gables is trying to be somewhere in the middle. And so these are some of the faux finishes that are kind of reducing or removing the architectural line and just looking at the materials. And these are mapped onto the surfaces, both the floor and the wall, kind of like a wainscoting. And so this is how black terrazzo is coming in as a veneer tile, not poured in place and polished. And then when two materials come together, is usually at a threshold of a room. And then through the long view of the houses on the first floor, this is a 55-foot view through the house. And so we're standing in the front, I think, master bedroom. And this is a concrete vinyl finish, looking through to a yellow marbled finish. You can't really see the detail in the picture. And then looking even further through to the black terrazzo kitchen. So this notion that the faux finishes also can do kind of a color blocking through space. This is one of my favorite views of the house, which is showing that roof room, which is a bedroom being hung from the roof above. And then in the bathroom, you know, we're going back to marble, but this is not real marble, obviously. It's a cartoon image of marble. The pink veining is made on a ceramic tile. So this is the third model that I would call what's happening with the architecture. This is the one-to-one model. There's 87 CLT panels, and they're assembled with that 40-ton crane sitting on the right. It was assembled in 14 days by a 4-person crew. I think it's interesting to look at how it's being assembled and think about it as a model in the way that we cut and make maybe foam core or chipboard models on our desk. It's the same process, it's just scaled up 1-to-1. So instead of gluing things together at seams with glue, we're now screwing it together with really long screws. There were 4 engineers on the project. My colleague at Harvard, Hanif Kara, structural engineer in London, a group out of New Hampshire called Bensonwood, who then subbed out the numbers to Fire Tower, and then we had a local engineer in Atlanta. Not to say that this was a hard geometry. I think the fabrication is quite easy. It was fabricated in Austria with KLH, and they're able to cut kind of a house of this size in one day at their facility. And so this is the end of the first day install, and it kind of looked like half the house was already there. Yeah, a lot of coordination to make sure all the panels were flip milled and sorted in the right orientation and direction. And we're doing pretty complex cuts on all the edges. And CLT is a finished product on the interior, so every time someone touches it or it gets banged around or shifts transportation, we have to then sand out those mistakes. This is a set of drawings which was a construction sequence for the installer, and so he didn't have a computer on site. If there's 87 panels, there's 87 drawings. And the engineer on top was drawing through all the connection details of exactly how the screw drive angle needed to happen so that it didn't come through on the interior. This is the factory in, how are we doing on time? The product was made in Austria, and it had to go into 3 open-top shipping containers over to the port of Savannah, and then trucked over on 11 hotshot trailers. And that was due to the neighborhood and the kind of tightness of the site. And so then piles and piles of CLT panels started arriving. They were supposed to be in the order of picking them off the truck and then dropping them straight onto the house. So if I'm really concerned with faux finishes, I also had to be really concerned with the order and the logistics of managing all the things arriving on site. But I really just wanted to care about the faux finishes, but I had to kind of get in there and make it happen. So this is Terry Ducat, the installer from Seattle, Washington. He put together the first CLT house in the US by Susan Jones. That was kind of the most heroic panel there. It's 35 feet long and one of the heaviest. The exterior walls are made of 3-ply CLT. The floor is made of 7-ply, and the roof is made of 5-ply. And the drone also, I think, helps it make it look like a model or out of scale. So I think what's interesting about working on the ordinary in architecture is moments like, if you look at the second gable over and then look straight up, it kind of aligns with that other gable, 2 neighbors away. That was not planned, but I think things like that kind of emerge because of what the material and the context that you're working on. So right after the CLT is assembled, there's a big push to dry it in and to get the waterproofing and windows installed. And so I had one afternoon with a photographer in Atlanta, Patrick Higney, who came in and photograph the interior. So I really am interested in these photographs because of the rawness of the structure and all the construction dings and the way all the brackets are like holding the panels together. Remember, that's that same view that we looked at a minute ago. So if the faux finishing is happening on the interior of the house, it's also happening on the exterior. And for this, I'm looking at the work by Mary Corse in the 1968 when she was making the white light paintings. So she's taking glass beads that are used typically in road striping, and she's painting with them. And so in the gallery, her things are kind of really glowing. And so at the GSD with research assistants, I was trying to come up with a way to use these beads at the scale of architecture, and was very interested in thinking about what stucco could do, and how we might reference like fake bricks with these like glittery beads. And so there was an opportunity to install and show this work at the Yi Yang Gallery in Boston. And this is shots from that exhibition. So this research is happening way before we get on site. And so when we get on site, and I'm kind of interviewing subcontractors to do this fake brick thing that I had worked so hard on in Boston, one of the subcontractors said, "Oh, well, we have already done these like white fake bricks on an Arby's around the corner." So, yeah, I just like proceeded on. So it's a product, and it's basically like a sticker or a template, so it gets stuck on, and then the last layer of stucco is troweled on. And so at the scale of the house, it's a 55-foot long, I think, drawing of bricks. But what Arby's doesn't have, that House Gables has, is this kind of glittery reflective surface. So on the left is my iPhone at dusk, and on the right is with the flash. And then back to the interior, some of the double height spaces. I mean, I think what the roof plan offers is if we maybe start to think about architecture in tight conditions and tight sites and small footprints, the roof plan has the ability to make very volumetric interiors so that you don't feel like you're living in an 800 square foot floor plate, but something much larger. These photographs are by architectural photographer called Naro out of London, and she really looked at how, you'll see this in the gallery, it's sitting right behind the dollhouse. I mean, she was trying to photograph the final work like a dollhouse, I think, in many cases. There are two white spaces in the house. One is this kind of north-facing patio on the second floor, and the second is on the right here. This is the garage. So it's all kind of high gloss white metal panels and painted floor. And I worked with a second photographer, Tim Hersley from Little Rock, Arkansas. And so we got on the warehouse behind, and Tim had this idea to light the house with artificial lights. So this is me taking a picture of Tim taking a picture. And then this is his final photograph. And so here you can see, so two facades of the house are the fake bricks, and two are kind of a scaled up version of brick, and you can see what's happening kind of at that one corner. And this is the last image, just to say, if you kind of squint your eyes, maybe it looks like one of those domestic hats that was in the gallery 5 years earlier. This was a project that I had to take on a lot of risk to pull off. And I just point back to John Portman and the Atlanta skyline, who I think took a lot of risk as kind of a developer architect and invented a typology in Atlanta called the super atrium. Thank you.